Obviously lived in Mayfield all my life and had a great childhood, and Mayfield's a great area, and I'm very proud to be from Mayfield.
So the upbringing in Cork and Rockmount was massive to me, and very, very fortunate.
Well, I always remember that my brothers used to play for Rockmount. It was just kind of a family tradition. It was a fair track from where I lived in Mayfield. Rockmount is from Shandon. And as I said, I just followed my brother's footsteps. And the managers at the time were Timmy Murphy and Gino Sullivan, who sadly passed away now. And they were the managers at the time, and I just decided to play for Rockmount. I remember I signed when I was about 8 or 9, and that was for the under-12s. And unfortunately, I was kicked about a bit the first few years, but I stayed there for 9 years, and Rockmount was great for me. Fortunately enough, I've done well in England, and people say, you came from Cork Ramblers, but unfortunately they seem to forget that I was at Rockmount for 9 years, 9 really good years, and I was lucky enough to play in a good team where I think we won literally the double every year. So unfortunately we didn't win a national trophy, but that's the way it goes.
We played all through the years, under 9s up to 16s. He was a very small young fella, and but his ability back then was unbelievable. His passing, he never gave the ball away. He scored a lot of goals, but this size of him now, if you just saw a picture of him when he was 15, you'd never thought he'd be the same fella. The one thing about him, he was only, as you say, tiny, but he'd never give the ball away, and he'd never be knocked off it. And if there was any ever trouble on the pitch, he'd be there. He'd never back away from anything. A lot of scouts would have looked at him, and saw the size of him, and that would have put a few of them off.
Wild-man, I used to call him. He was got things going, like middle of the field. He was involved all the time. You could tell him do a job like, and he'd do it.
A little nipper, a 9-year-old nipper. He got the under 11 player there when he was only 9. He was a fanatic, training and everything like that. He wanted to play all the time.
We used to go down to old Christian's pitch, the rugby pitch. We used to get in there before anyone see us, train away. That's where we started. Then we went out to Rockmount Park. Rockmount Park was about 7 miles. You couldn't get out there. It was football mad all the time, football. As I said, he'd any weather, he'd come down in the rain, hail, snow, come down for training. Soccer mad all the time, That's what he lives for.
Alan O'Sullivan, who I thought at the time would be the player that would make it. I think I'm unfair in saying that he was probably the best player on our team. He went to Luton. He was in Luton for 4 or 5 years, but came back to Cork, signed for Cork City.
At the time I suppose Paul McCarthy was a big strapping young fella for a centre-back, like. I thought Paul would be the first to go out down the stroke, like.
I was very small, as I say, sometimes I used to play against bigger players, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall, I was told, so I used to get stuck in, and that's the only thing I could do, really.
He was the only player I knew growing up that actually used to write the clubs across channel looking for trials, whereas most other people I knew were actually waiting for the scouts to come knocking on their door.
Yeah, I did write the clubs, but again, as I said, there was millions of kids. And there was only 1 or 2 that back to me and just said, if you're good enough, you'll be spotted.
He was about 14 or 15. They say, God, he's a great lad, and he's very talented, and he can do anything with the ball. And
I played with good players, even when I was 15 and I was 16. Some of the players got trials in England, and unfortunately I didn't, but I just kept plugging away.
He was meant to come off to Brighton when he was young, and my dad set it up, but in the end the Irish scout put the Brighton manager off it because he questioned his temperament and his size, which